Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Come December, and there is no indication that the Chinese are getting ready to back off from their aggressive posture in Ladakh. The costs of war are definitely likely to be considerable, with one estimate saying that it costs 10 lakh per soldier in one turnaround year in such a conflict. So that's a lot that we're going to pay, which of course doesn't matter really in terms of national security, but it does come at a very awkward time when the economy is not doing too well as it should, and it's a time when we need foreign investments and capital urgently into as many sectors as possible. Perhaps it's time, therefore, to review our strategy and maybe invite Chinese capital into non-strategic areas, and through private players, so-called private players one should add, even while banning them from strategic areas and continuing the policy that the Narendra Modi government has taken. So far as we know, they've banned some 267 apps, banned FDI from neighbors, and has taken a series of actions to protect companies from distressed sale to China, distress buying from China. But it has also taken up Chinese capital in areas like a rapid rail project, where it offered the lowest bid, which made very good business sense. It equally made very good strategic sense to ban Chinese companies from building strategic roads along the border. All of this comes at a time when the Chinese government is trying to gain more control over the private sector. A recent directive states that the United Front Works Department, which has been accused of espionage, of stealing technology, and so on, has been asked to gain more ideological influence in the private sector. Remember that private enterprise has a huge role in China. It accounts for some 60% of GDP, 70% of innovation, 80% of urban employment, and 90% of new jobs. This is the power that the CCP is trying to harness for itself. This greater control is clearly not something that the private sector is going to like very much. For example, in 2015, Jack Ma had proclaimed, in the past 20 years, the government was so strong. Now they are getting weak. It's our opportunity. It's our showtime. That was then. Now it's payback time. So what we could in fact consider is that using certain private players who are very, very good in their sectors, but are also suffering in the new COVID era, into new areas like, for instance, electric vehicles and solar technology. Now, India has actually made a commitment to almost shift over to electric vehicles by 2023, by 25, to shift over almost completely especially in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment. In fact, the economic survey says that we stand poised to be one of the leaders in this area. But the trouble is we don't have the infrastructure, the charging points and so on. And here is where it is possible to use Chinese assistance here. China, in fact, released no less than 785 new models of new energy vehicles in a recent auto exposition, out of which 160 were electrified. It already has thousands and thousands upon charging stations. But as experts point out, this sector is heavily dependent on subsidies, even as it struggles to catch up with giants such as Tesla and Mercedes. So the tie-up is obvious. Both countries want lower oil bills, and China at least is concentrating on cleaning up its pollution levels, which one hopes that India will also do. Remember that the shift to electric vehicles in India could produce a huge difference in the severe pollution which we've been suffering so far. Then, of course, there is the issue of solar energy, where Chinese technology it is massive in terms of its abilities. But in India, for example, we continue to rely on about more than 53% on coal, which is a source of it's dirty energy. And so the Prime Minister Modi himself has has considered this when he first came in, to that a shift to solar power is necessary. Now, what is happening again in China is that China has begun restricting expansion of its solar industry due to overcapacity. That situation could encourage deals that stress a Make in India option, for example, for photovoltaic products, and encouraging vulnerable Chinese industry to kickstart our own ailing solar industry, even while reducing its own costs. So these are just few examples where we can get the Chinese in to our benefit and in completely non-strategic areas, and thereby maybe perhaps getting a little influence in decision making, because these are really, really huge companies, as we just said. So the point here is we are in some areas, mundane areas, like for example, paracetamol or ibuprofen, an almost complete decoupling may in fact not be possible. We are far too intertwined as the global community finds itself in the same situation. So what we're suggesting is that maybe you can have your cake and eat it too. You are withdraw and decouple in areas where you want to protect your own industry, and bring in the Chinese in areas where you want huge capital, you want swift expansion, particularly in areas like these. Equally, perhaps it could be argued that we don't have the clout. We're not large enough to influence Chinese decision making, Beijing's decision making, in this, even if we call in these companies. But then it's also worth considering that our disputes with China are not quite so large as, for example, or so threatening as China finds in the South China Sea. So there is also a possibility that a sufficient private role may have a deterrent effect on military adventuring by Beijing. So it's just a chance that we can take our border disputes, whatever that we need to influence in China, could be through engaging with the Chinese private industry, even while energizing our own economy. That's in fact what eating your cake and having it too is actually one of the best economic practices going around.